For over a decade, I felt completely lost and trapped within OCD. I was constantly looking for certainty, doing the same compulsions, thinking I was getting closer to freedom, but I wasn't. I was actually feeding the cycle. Today, I want to share one hidden habit that really kept me stuck within OCD for all those years, and what finally helped me to break free. I've struggled with OCD since I was 16, and it really kind of became chronic for me. In those kind of late teen years and into my early 20s, it was very, very difficult because I was kind of doing all of the wrong things all of the time. I was fighting with the thoughts. I was looking for certainty. I was telling myself that I was kind of broken in some way. And actually, it was that last thing there, this kind of story that I was telling myself about OCD, that was actually the thing that was kind of keeping me stuck. I really had this idea that something awful had happened to me, that something had perhaps changed in my brain, that there was a kind of before and after event, and that this thing had kind of happened, and I couldn't go back to the person that I was before because of it. Now that OCD was kind of in its place, there was no way that I could go back to normal. I was always going to be trapped. I was always going to be stuck. No matter what I did, no matter who I worked with, no matter what, I was going to be stuck with this. And at that time, I didn't even know that I had OCD. I think that was a big part of the problem. I was obviously getting caught up in these kind of loops of thinking all the time, ruminating about it, looking for certainty, and not realizing that actually what I was really doing was getting caught up in the kind of OCD thought loop, trying to have that certainty, trying to figure it out all the time. If you're struggling with OCD and anxiety, I do offer a free discovery call. To get that, you can head over to my website, robertjamescoaching.com. There's a link in the show notes. And I had these huge limiting beliefs. And one of those was this kind of idea that, I really was broken, that perhaps, I had some severe mental health issue. I mean, of course, I was struggling with OCD, but I really felt that I was broken in some way. There was no way that I could find a way out of this problem. I was kind of damaged goods, and I really didn't know what to do with that. I didn't really open up to people because I think at that time in the UK, there was quite a lot of shame involved with mental health. Of course, there still is, but I think back then, more than 20 years ago, there was much less information about mental health. There was almost no information about OCD, and I felt this enormous shame about the whole experience, and I really didn't want to kind of open up to people about it. Of course, eventually I did, and eventually when I turned 30, I found out that I had OCD, and actually that was a huge sense of relief for me. I remember that being, this thing that was so important in my own story, because up until that point, I really did feel that I was broken. And when I realized that actually I had this disorder, which, many other people struggle with all over the world, and that actually it's something that is treatable, that you can learn to manage it. That was so inspiring for me, so important. And, really from that point onwards, everything began to shift for me, because I realized there was this potential, for change. And that's when I started to learn about acceptance commitment therapy and exposure and all of the big things that helped me to start kind of moving the needle in my life and learning to deal with OCD better. So what was really the big thing that kind of changed? Well, I think obviously what I was struggling with was a huge limiting belief, not knowing that I had OCD and believing that I was broken in some way, that there was nothing that could be done to kind of help me. And once I finally realized that I had OCD, what I started to do was to kind of pick that limiting belief apart, to start challenging it. And this is so important that we do this. Now, you can't just bring conscious awareness to that limiting belief and expect it to change. That would be fantastic if you could do that, and I really wish it was so. But, spending some time at reflecting on what your limiting beliefs could be. What are the stories and the narratives that you personally are telling yourself about OCD and about anxiety? Are they actually 100% true all the time? Or are they actually kind of stories, fictions that you've kind of created over the years that perhaps are trapping you in some way? And, when we start to do this, well, we start to bring more consciousness to it. And again, it doesn't mean it's going to change overnight, but if you can then start to do things that kind of challenge that limiting belief, maybe you do exposure activities that kind of prove that that limiting belief is not correct. Maybe you choose to kind of do things gently. I think sometimes if we try to kind of jump into the deep end with OCD and do the most difficult things too quickly, that can end up kind of backfiring. But, part of what I do in my coaching with people is actually saying, well, what's some small steps that you could take today that would actually kind of get you moving in the right direction and that would actually challenge that limiting belief that you've been holding on to for a long time. And as we start to do that over the days and weeks, you start building up evidence that actually that story that you've been telling yourself is not 100% true. And that actually, if you can push yourself a little bit, you begin to see that you can do all sorts of things that maybe the OCD had persuaded you that you couldn't. And this is obviously inspiring as we start to get back into our lives and we start to kind of, make progress again. We start feeling really good about ourselves. We start seeing that we're much stronger than perhaps we thought. And most importantly of all, we start getting in touch with our own personal power. OCD has this horrible way of taking away your sense of empowerment. And it's so important that we realize that we are empowered. We don't have to listen to that story. We don't have to listen to those limiting beliefs. We can take action and it will begin to help us to feel better. So I really hope that you found that helpful. Remember, I do offer a free discovery call. To get that, you can head over to my website at robertjamescoaching.com. There's a link in the show notes. Many thanks, and I will see you next time. This video is for education only. It's not therapy or medical advice. If you're struggling, please speak with a licensed mental health professional.